how to go from this to this. What is up, guys? Josh here with BFPC, coming at you on a Monday afternoon. In today's video, I just want to give you guys a complete overview of everything that I know about running a successful cut. What to do, how to do it, when to do it, what do I eat, how do I change my workouts, and what about cardio? I will go over all of that in today's video. By the end, you'll understand how to set up a successful cut from start all the way to finish. This video is more aimed at people who don't have a ton of experience dieting, but if you do have some experience, I'm sure you'll learn a thing or two as well. If you want just a quick overview of all the guidelines of a diet and you just want to see me put everything together in a concise way, I'll put the timestamp up on screen for you to skip to. Now, if you want a deeper understanding overall of how everything works, then the bulk of this video is for you. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So let's start with the target pace. So it seems to be pretty common for people in the fitness industry to say that you want to lose 0.5 to 1% of your body weight a week during a cut. So a 200-pound person would need to lose 1 to 2 pounds a week to be on this pace. I would agree with this. Doing it this way makes sure that you minimize muscle loss and fatigue while maximizing fat loss. At the beginning of your cut, you might even be able to get away with a pace closer to or even over that 1% mark, but as you get deeper into the cut, you become more at risk for muscle loss, so you might want to stay closer to that 0.5% mark, also to help combat that diet fatigue. So if you have a target date that you want to get lean by, you can use this pace as well as how much weight you want to lose to figure out how long you need to give yourself the cut. So I'll just stick to that previous example to make it easy. So if you're 200 pounds and you know you want to lose 20 pounds, that means that you need to give yourself 10 to 20 weeks to cut. Ideally towards that larger number, especially if it's your first cut, because it's not very uncommon to run into some roadblocks along the way. To make sure that you're staying on pace, I personally believe that it's best to weigh yourself every single morning right after you get out of bed, and to track your weight on an app like Cronometer, where it'll make a chart for you just so that you can see the trends and you can make sure that your pace is on track. You can more easily see it. Now, I believe this is best for a few reasons. If you were to weigh yourself less often, like once a week, this only really gives you a very small snapshot of the weight that you were that week. So you can't really tell if that particular day was the top of an upswing or the bottom of a downswing, which is gonna make it harder to make good decisions regarding your diet. Weighing yourself every single day gives you so much more information on how your body is reacting to certain things and where you are on average. Another reason why it's good is because when you weigh yourself first thing every morning, that is going to mentally set the focus of that day towards fat loss, which in my experience helps you do what you need to do and helps keep you on track and avoid things that would mess up the diet. So what ends up happening is that by weighing yourself every single day, you end up in this positive feedback loop where doing the difficult things for fat loss, such as more cardio or restricting your calories, becomes easier to do because you get to see the number on the scale go down every day. Now, that being said, it can also be a negative feedback loop for some people. So some people will need to see that weight going down and they're going to do just a crap load of cardio and they're going to starve themselves every day to make the scale go down. This can be a positive feedback loop if you use it correctly, but if you're doing stuff like that, you are using the feedback loop completely incorrectly. Just be mindful if it's starting to turn into that negative feedback loop, and maybe just weigh yourself less often if that's the case. Overall, you've got to remember that each new day that you weigh yourself is a new data point that all comes together to help you make future decisions, such as adding cardio or decreasing calories. A single day in itself is not enough information for you to make significant changes regarding your diet. Small changes, yes, but big changes, absolutely not. Based off one day, do not do it. So I'll go ahead and give you an example. So let's say you step on the scale in the morning and you're a pound up from the previous day. The healthy thing to do would be to say, okay, well, maybe I just ate a little bit too late last night, so I'll make sure to eat a little bit earlier so that it's not affecting my morning weight. Or maybe I didn't quite get enough steps the day previous. I need to be making sure that I hit my step goal every day. On the other hand, an unhealthy and illogical decision would be to cut a lot of water out of your diet the next day, or decrease your calories the next day to make up for it. You make decisions based on the data that you've collected over the last 7 to 14 days. If the trends from that period suggest that you need to make a change, then do it. If it's a day or two of increased weight, chill out. It's totally normal. There is never a need to freak out about not being on pace. These are logical decisions, not emotional decisions. With that out of the way, let's dive into activity recommendations. So throughout the day, the number one thing that burns the most calories is not cardio, is not weightlifting, but something called NEAT. Some of you guys may have heard of this. NEAT stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And what this basically means is a fancy word for all the low intensity activity that you do throughout the day for a long period of time. Things that you wouldn't even normally think of as fat loss. This is why on a cut, it's always good to go out of your way to do activity that's low to moderate intensity over the course of the entire day. The best examples I can give are just chores, errands, or just doing things in general, not sitting down. This burns a lot more calories than most people think and can be a great way to keep your fat loss pace moving while still eating higher calories. So I personally like to use a step goal as a sort of minimum NEAT requirement. So the way that you do this correctly is the week before that you start your cut, you're going to track how many steps you get every single day. And then you're going to take the 7-day average of each of those days. And the first week of your cut, you're going to aim to increase it by 1,000 steps. And then the next week, you're going to increase it by another 1,000 until you hit about 10,000 steps. And then you can pretty much stop there. Now, you can take it up as high as 15K, but I would not go over 15,000 a day just because you're generating more fatigue for really not that much more benefit. So I'll give you an example. So let's say you figure out that the week before your cut that you were averaging about 3,000 steps a day, which is pretty low. What you want to do the first week of your cut, you're going to aim for 4,000, the week after 5,000, the week after 6,000, or you can take it more aggressively if you want. It's up to you. But basically, you're going to end up topping out around 10K, and then you're just going to go from there at 10,000 steps. And one more thing about the steps is this is actually a lot more important than most people think. So make sure to get your steps. It's going to make a huge difference when you're trying to cut. So what about cardio? I usually set a step goal before I start doing any type of cardio. So my cardio at the beginning of a cut might actually be pretty minimal, and I mostly use NEAT as well as the calorie deficit to push most of my fat loss pace. But here is how I use cardio to help push my fat loss pace further. So if you're at that 1% per week mark and your calories are still relatively high, you don't really need to add in any more cardio. You're pretty much good. But if you've really been on top of things and your pace seems to be dipping below that 1% mark, then you can really start to add in more cardio. Just a day of cardio and then 15 minutes to start. I usually just add in a day at a time and keep it at 15 minutes and then work it up from there. Over the course of the cut, I'll usually add a minimum of 3 days of cardio, but I won't go over 5 days of cardio. It'll be up to you and what you're comfortable doing and what you're comfortable adding in. Once you've topped out the amount of days that you're willing to do cardio, if you want to increase your fat loss pace, you'll have to make the decision between adding 5 minutes of cardio to each one of your cardio days or pulling out calories. Pulling calories, in my opinion, is reserved for only breaking harder plateaus, while adding in cardio will give your fat loss pace a softer bump. But what kind of cardio should you be doing? In general, you want to be doing a body weight bearing form of cardio that you're able to keep your heart rate between about 120 and 140 BPM. This is the low to moderate intensity heart rate zone. for most people. For certain people who are untrained or maybe aren't used to cardio, you might want to start closer to 100 BPM and then work your way up gradually to that 120 to 140 BPM heart rate zone. Staying here allows for the best fat loss pace with the lowest amount of fatigue. Some of my top picks for cardio are incline treadmill, elliptical, rower, and the assault bike. It's up to pretty much your preference. I would say the only objectively bad pick is that one bike where you just like sit back the whole time. That one's just a bad pick. Your diet is the real MVP in terms of what's gonna push your fat loss pace the hardest. We're gonna start with calories and then move on to macros and then what kind of food you should be eating. And I could do a whole dedicated video on this in itself, but I'm gonna just try to give you the most necessary and important information when it comes to diet on a cut. So how many calories should you be eating on a cut? So this is gonna depend person to person. What you'll need to do first is find out how many calories are maintenance for you. The way you do this is before you start your cut, you're going to take a week where you don't change a single thing about your diet. You eat the same things that you always eat. The only thing you're going to do is you're just going to track those things. So eat the same amount of food and the normal type of food that you typically eat. Don't try to eat more, don't try to eat less, don't try to eat differently. You're just gonna try to measure your food and calculate your daily calories. After a week of doing this, you're gonna average out the calories that you ate across the 7 days. And assuming that you maintain weight, you didn't gain any weight or lose any weight, this is where your maintenance calories are. This process is super important for figuring out where your metabolism is. It can be different for everybody. And ideally, you would be starting your cut coming off of a bulk, because during peak bulk, your metabolism is running the hottest, which is actually like a cheat code when it comes to starting a cut, because you can lose more fat eating more calories and doing less activity overall. Now, my recommendation is slightly different for people who maybe aren't on a bulk, or people who, to put it bluntly, just have terrible eating habits, like they eat very inconsistently or they eat a lot of junk food. The best thing that you can do is what I like to call priming your metabolism. This is basically like going on a mini bulk, and I know this sounds counterintuitive, but just give it a listen. You'll do this mini bulk / maintenance for roughly 1 month, sometimes less, sometimes more, where you focus on eating healthier food, you focus on eating more frequently throughout the day, and consistently keeping your calories a little bit higher. And I'm not saying that you can't lose weight if you don't do this, but trust me, it makes the process of dieting significantly easier if you can start it off by doing this. So now that you have your maintenance calories, the first week that you start your cut, you're simply just going to subtract 500 calories from your maintenance, and that's where you will start the cut at. So how do you know when to pull more calories out? So in my opinion, if your weight seems to be at a very hard plateau, like you haven't lost any weight for the last 1 to 2 weeks, or maybe you've even gained a little bit of weight in that time period, then you'll want to pull about 250 calories out. If your fat loss pace is still happening but a little bit slower, you might want to consider upping the cardio instead. Or you can take a hybrid approach where you pull out less than 250 calories, but you also add in a little bit of cardio as well. It's going to be up to you and your situation. Every situation is different, so it's up to your best judgment. If I feel like my calories are starting to get way too low to the point where I feel hungry and tired all the time, I might be more inclined to add in a little bit of cardio and keep my calories higher. On the flip side, if I feel like I'm spending a little bit too much time every week doing cardio, but I feel like my food is good, I'm not really that hungry, I might be more inclined to pull some calories out. Again, it's up to your best judgment. All right, now what kind of food do you want to be eating on your cut? Ideally, you want to pick food that is the most nutritious while being the least calorie dense, or the most filling. That's another way to put it, the most filling. Basically, you'll want to pick food that will physically fill up your stomach the most, while being the least amount of calories, but also the most nutritious. This is actually really important and sometimes overlooked. Most people oversimplify a diet to calories in and calories out, and it is mostly true. But if you are eating foods that don't fill you up very much and are higher calories, you're going to get hungry. even at the same amount of calorie target. And when you get hungry, your body, to put it simply, sends out starvation hormones that blunt your metabolism. And this can hold back your fat loss pace pretty significantly. So one person can be losing more weight than another person on the same amount of calories, everything else held equal, if that one person is eating more filling foods than the other person. Some good options for healthy filling foods are quinoa, potatoes, rice, lean meats, vegetables, etc. Just make sure that you're cool eating it for the entirety of your cut. That's really it. So an example day for me personally might be like an omelet with veggies for breakfast, maybe some lean ground beef with it, fat-free Greek yogurt with some type of flavoring like honey just throughout the day as a snack, chicken breast with quinoa and broccoli for lunch, and sweet potatoes, salmon, and asparagus for dinner. And that is just an example, so feel free to structure your meals however you personally want to. Also, just as a side note, it's typically good to get in quick absorbing carbs before your workout and after, just to help fuel your workout and also to help with recovery. Some examples are like honey, rice cakes, or a sports drink like Gatorade. So let's talk about macros. So I'll tell you guys the way that I do macros, and I'm not claiming this is like the definitive way to do macros. I would listen to you if you said, oh, I do macros differently because of this reasoning. But I'll just go ahead and tell you what I do. So I guess we'll start with protein. So at the beginning of the diet, I like to keep my protein higher, closer to 1 gram per pound of body weight. I don't go above that because to me that's a waste of calories on a diet. And protein actually ends up being one of the first things that I take out of my diet when I decrease my calories. The reason for that is because protein, aside from the essential protein needed for recovery, is not really as necessary on a cut. I mean, if you think about it, you keep the protein so high on a bulk because you're trying to put on more mass, but you're not doing that during a cut. So you might as well sacrifice the protein a little bit because it's not as easily used by your body for energy like fat and carbs are. Now, you don't want to push the protein too low because then you're, sacrificing a little bit of that recovery ability. But in general, protein isn't really used very efficiently by your body in terms of producing energy. So you would want to give it a little bit of a higher proportion of carbs and fat so that your body has an easier source of energy. Now, moving on to carbs, I do like to keep carbs as high as possible. To me, this is the golden macro when you're doing a cut. So I really just try to keep my carbs as high as I possibly can given the amount of calories that I'm eating. So I really don't go too far below 200 grams or even at the very bottom like 150 grams of carbs. You do want to try to keep carbs as high as possible. It's the easiest macro for your body to convert into energy and helps support your metabolism, which in turn helps your fat loss pace stay consistent. Now, moving on to fat. Fat you can actually push down pretty low. There is a minimum amount of fat that would be considered essential fat for optimal energy and hormone function. And this amount of fat is 1/3 gram per pound of body weight. So like, for example, if you're 180 pounds, you wouldn't really want to push the fat too far below 60 grams. That's the minimum amount of essential fat. So a lot of times when I'm looking to decrease one of my macros because I'm decreasing my calories, I'll usually decrease the fat up to about 1/3 gram per pound of body weight. And then I'll decrease protein, not by a ton, but like I might take it from 1 gram per pound of body weight to maybe about 0.8 grams ish. Maybe I'll like subtract 20 grams off the top there. And I'll usually try to keep carbs as high as possible. So that's pretty much what I do in terms of macros. I mean, again, macros aren't as important as overall calories, and the specific amount of grams of macros that you need is going to be highly dependent on your body weight. So you'll have to do your own math there. So that's really pretty much everything you need to know when it comes to a diet. Now, as for the workouts, just the weightlifting itself. you pretty much want to keep your workouts unchanged from when you were on a bulk. However, I do want to talk about one thing, and that is volume. You might want to think about decreasing your volume, not in every case, but in some cases. So you do want to be careful about doing junk volume. You kind of want to trim the fat off of your workouts, if you will. Reason being is that extra unnecessary sets will compound fatigue a lot quicker, and these extra sets aren't really going to build you any extra muscle anyways, especially when you get deeper into the cut. It's more of you trying to hang on to the muscle instead of building more muscle. So when I personally do a bulk, I'll usually work up to higher volume over time, but this approach is not necessary during a cut. So on my bulk, I'll usually cap the sets to 5 sets per exercise, and I'll work up to that over the span of a mesocycle. But on a cut, I'll usually cap my sets to 3 sets per exercise. So this isn't low volume, but it's more of just like moderate volume, but just the necessary amount of sets. And you can even argue like 2 sets for some exercises. You'll have to be the judge of that. If you're already doing only 2 to 3 sets per exercise peak bulk, you probably don't need to think about decreasing your volume at all. And in your case, you don't need to change anything about the way you're training. Unless you are getting overlapping muscle soreness, then you probably want to think about decreasing. So overall, I don't really have much to say about your training. You pretty much want to keep it the exact same as the bulk. Maybe think about decreasing the volume depending on your case. I do want to add in a couple of smaller little things that would help your diet that are commonly overlooked, and those things are sleep and stress levels. Sleep is honestly huge. If you're not sleeping well, you got to figure it out ASAP, because it can actually hold back your fat loss pace in itself. You need 7 to 9 hours of a night of good restful sleep. If you're waking up because you're hungry, try to eat a bigger, more filling meal closer to when you go to bed. If you just cannot get to sleep or stay asleep, there are 2 really good supplements that I would recommend, and obviously look into these yourself, do your own research. But they are magnesium glycinate and ashwagandha. You'll want to try to take them within an hour before you go to sleep. If you are going to try the ashwagandha, try to take it as sparingly as you can, because you can build up a tolerance to it, which defeats the purpose of taking it. Also, stress management is important too, so do whatever you got to do to bring down those stress levels. All right, so let's take all of this information and put it together in an example so you can see the process that I go through when I'm doing a diet. So let's say I'm currently 190 pounds, that's me peak bulk, and I want to get down to 170 pounds, and that's where I want to bottom out at. And I know I want to get down to this bottom weight by the end of April. So that means that I need to lose 20 pounds total, and at a pace of 0.5 to 1% of my body weight a week. Losing 20 pounds should take 11 to 21 weeks. Since I've done a fat loss diet before, I'm going to give myself 16 weeks to do the full diet. I know that's enough for me. It'll give me enough time, and maybe even I'll be able to finish the diet a little bit early. So that means I'll start my cut early to mid-January. Since I'm coming off a bulk, there's no need to do that metabolic priming phase. I'll just track my calories in the week before my cut and figure out where my maintenance is. So more specifically, what I'll do is I'll take that first week of January, and what I'm going to do in that first week is I'm going to track my calories every single day. I'm not going to change anything about what I'm eating versus peak bulk, and I'm just going to make sure to measure everything out and track it in an app like Chronometer. Now, after this first week, I'm going to average out those calories, and maybe I'll find that my maintenance is roughly 3,000 calories. Also, something that I like to do before I diet is take a deload week just to clear out any fatigue that I may have. So now going into the second week of January, I'm going to take 500 calories out, putting me at 2,500 calories. I'm going to cap my volume, decrease it a tad bit to just 3 sets per exercise instead of the 5 sets that I was doing peak bulk. And I'm going to make sure that I'm walking 10,000 steps a day. I've also started meal prepping my food to make sure that I'm anchoring my days with 3 big nutritious meals with various snacks throughout the day. Just doing this is probably going to carry me through my first 3 weeks at that 1% per week fat loss pace. So now by week 3, let's say I'm 6 pounds down. But on week 4, I see my fat loss pace dipping below that 1% mark, so I add in a little bit of cardio. On weeks 4, 5, and 6, 6, I'm adding in a day of cardio on each of those weeks, bringing me up to 3 days of cardio for 15 minutes per session. And I'm making sure to keep my heart rate at 140 BPM on each of those cardio days. So on week 6, I'm now 9 pounds down. Week 7, pace is still below that 1% per week mark. So I'm gonna add in about 5 minutes of cardio each day, making it so that I'm 10 pounds down by week 7. Week 8, I'm pretty much stagnant. I'm not losing any weight. I just kind of let it ride. I'm stagnant until my next meal prep day, but I don't freak out at all because I have a plan for this. I expected this to happen. I make sure that my sleep and my stress levels are good, which they are, and then I make the decision to pull 250 calories out of my diet to keep my fat loss pace going. For the rest of week 8 and week 9, I'm now at 2250 calories and I'm hitting that 1% per week fat loss pace again. And since I am decreasing my calories by 250, I'm really looking at my diet and seeing what things I can change or cut out. And I'm really trying to eliminate the fluff so I can eat the same amount of volume of food while decreasing the calories so that I'm not becoming hungry. Maybe I'll take out some dairy or juice, or just try to find in general lower calorie options for what I'm already eating. So by week 10, I'm at about 14 pounds down. By week 11, my pace is dipping again below that 1% per week mark. So I add in a little bit more cardio, and now I'm at 30 minutes of cardio 3 days a week. So by week 12, I'm now 17 pounds down. I'm almost at my goal. So going into week 13, my pace is closer to that 0.5% per week, and it looks like it's probably going to dip below that. I know I'm gonna need to do something to keep the pace going, but I don't really want to pull too many calories out because I'm kind of starting to get a little bit hungry, but I do have a bit more room to add a little bit more cardio. I can comfortably do that. So to finish out those last couple of weeks, I'm only going to pull out 150 calories from my diet, and I'm going to add in another day of cardio, putting me at 2100 calories and 4 days a week of cardio at 30 minutes each day. This keeps my fat loss pace at 1% per week, and by the 15-week mark, I've now hit my goal of 170 pounds, and it's even looking like I'm starting to go a little bit below that with minimal muscle loss, minimal strength loss, almost zero. This does not mean the diet is over. On weeks 16 and 17, I'm going to be transitioning myself from being on a diet and being in this low metabolic state to being able to maintain 170 pounds with a healthy metabolism. I do this by cutting out most of my cardio on week 16 and adding in 150 calories. So on week 16, I'm at 2250 calories and just enough cardio to remain healthy. On week 17, what I'm going to try to do is see how high I can push my calories without gaining a significant amount of weight. So I'm just going to add in 150 calories each day. If I gain no weight, I'm just going to keep adding. If I do gain weight, I'm just going to hold it there and wait. I'm going to repeat this process until I can find my body's new maintenance. Ideally, during this process, you don't want to allow yourself to gain more than 2 to 4% of your body weight back. So I'm going to really make sure that I'm not going above 175 pounds. I might sit closer to like 172, 173 pounds. From there, you can transition into more intuitive eating or even take a deload, and you can make the choice. Maybe you want to stay lean from then on, or you can transition into another bulk. It's up to you. So that is pretty much a simple overview of everything that I know when it comes to doing a fat loss diet. I'll probably end up doing a dedicated video on each one of these individual little things like cardio or diet, where I just dive a little bit deeper into them. Also, I do want to say with the diet, what you put in is really and truly what you get out of it. The more meticulous and unwavering that you are, the better results that you're going to get from it. Not saying that you won't get results if you don't do some of these things, but if you really are meticulous about every single one of these things, you'll definitely be able to tell by the end of the cut. Hope y'all enjoyed the video. Hope y'all learned something. If you want me to dive deeper into any one of these individual topics, just let me know in the comments. If you did enjoy this video, if you want to learn some more about lifting or my thoughts about lifting, go ahead and check out this video as well. All right, guys, peace.